Well, I just came from the White House, and the president made it absolutely clear, no quibbling about it, absolutely clear, he will not sign a clean reauthorization of the Patriot Act unless we reform FISA. The proposal I gave him was this: don't use FISA, which is a foreign intelligence court, to spy on Americans. Simply say that Americans, if you want to spy on them, you have to go to a constitutional Article 3 court to get the wiretap. This would protect Americans from the abuses that happened to the Trump campaign, but these abuses could happen to Republicans or Democrats if we have biased people in either the FBI or in the intelligence agencies. So I think the best reform is let's take Americans out of FISA and let's keep the foreign surveillance court targeted towards foreigners.
I think that makes all the sense in the world, Senator, and that's great news that the president will stand and demand reform of those FISA courts that have beleaguered him, which has violated his constitutional rights for years.
Yeah, and it's not a done deal yet, though, because there were many voices in the room who don't want to reform it. They want to rubber stamp it, and their loyalty is to the deep state and not to the president and not really to fairness or the Constitution. So I can tell you it was a spirited debate, but I can tell you the president absolutely sides with those of us who say there has to be reform, and he's not signing any bill that doesn't have reform on it.
Well, I know one person who wants that bill to be passed without reform, and that's Mitch McConnell. And he said this: if we could roll this soundbite, if you'd bear with us, Senator, I'm told that it's not there. He said in that soundbite, if we're unable to resolve, my preference would be for another extension, which give us more time to talk. And for those interested in FISA reform, I put myself in that camp. The Attorney General is addressing that himself. I have to say, it is, to me, dispiriting to hear a senior Republican official speak like that of a law that has been so misused and abused.
I can tell you the president was absolutely clear. He did not pull any punches. He said that he does not want this to happen to another president ever again. I'm with him. And for me, this is not a partisan thing. I had this viewpoint before President Trump. And actually, I would say this if it were a Democrat president that had been abused. Nobody that chooses to get involved in politics. Can you imagine if they use this on political activists? Or what if you're a right to life activist, or you're an activist for, a variety of different issues? Should you be allowed to be targeted because the people on the other side use the intelligence apparatus for political purposes? This has to stop. And I think this is the time to do it. Some of the people in the room that want to reauthorize it, let's wait, we'll study the issue. No, young man, it's not the time nor the place to do this. They say come back at a later date. That means they don't want it to happen, and it's a game they play up here to delay things so we never get any reform.
Are we going to get reform this time? The president on the side of right, I can't imagine too many people successfully standing against him.
I think the reason we will is because typically presidential power is protected by all presidents of both parties. Congress tries to take some of that power back for the people. But here we have a president who's been abused by executive power of the previous president, and he sees very clearly that this power, can be abusively used. And so, no, I don't think President Trump is weak on this issue. I don't think he's pulling any punches. He wants real reform. He told him that. And the people who push back, he said, I tell people every night at these rallies, I'm going to fix this problem. Look what they did to me. I'm going to fix this problem. And he says we can't go out there to the American people and say, oh, well, we just reauthorized it with no reforms. What would they think of us? So the president knows that this has to be fixed. He feels strongly about it. I feel strongly about it. Mike Lee and Jim Jordan and the other reformers, Mark Meadows, we all feel strongly something has to be done. So I think our voices were loud. The president was with us, and we'll see. But I think nothing is going to be passed without real reform.
Well, that is great news you bring us from that meeting. I want to turn very quickly to Lindsey Graham, the head of the Judiciary Committee, who's been promising that there would be investigation. He would investigate the investigators. We have seen nothing but statements from him, and we've heard nothing but remarks from him. And sometimes they don't all line up. And at this point, 13 months in, he has done absolutely nothing to carry out that investigation. What is your sense of the Judiciary Committee and what it's failed to do?
I think that his opinion is he's going to wait and let the investigators at the Department of Justice do this. But I really think there is a place for public hearings, because I don't know Mr. Durham at the Department of Justice. He may well do a complete job. We may well finally have people who are brought to justice for lying to the court. You know, all of these warrants that they got on the president's campaign were built upon a house of lies. Someone ought to be punished for that. And so I think we could use the Senate Judiciary Committee, but I don't know that we're necessarily going to. I think what's going to happen is we're going to have to wait to see what the Department of Justice does. But I'm not a real big fan of letting government investigate itself, the same branch of government investigate itself. We keep our fingers crossed that the people who abuse the system will be punished, but I don't think there's any guarantee of that.
No guarantee of it. Senator Ron Johnson, I have to compliment for putting out seeking the first subpoena tied to Biden and Burisma. He's actually trying to do something.
And I support him on that. I will vote on that. We don't know if we have all the Republicans. So look at that committee and think about who you think might not vote with us. And we need to let people know who those people are, because I will vote with Senator Johnson on allowing him to have the subpoena power. But there are some Republicans hanging in the balance.
Well, those hanging in the balance may be, elevating themselves on their own petard. We're going to be putting their names out, all who resist any kind of effort to do the right thing and to hold accountable those who've done wrong to this country and to this president for years now. Senator Rand Paul, we appreciate everything you're doing. Thank you so much for being with us here tonight.
Thanks.
Parts of